Welcome back again to the News OK Varsity Podcast. I'm Scott Wright of the Oklahoman and NewsOK.com, joined by Jacob Unruh, Trent Shaded. We are here again to talk a little bit of high school football with you. Thank you for joining us once again. All right, guys, we're coming up on Week 7, which counting playoffs is technically the halfway point of the football season, roughly. So here we are in the middle of the year. I got asked this question today and had no answer for it, so I'm asking you guys now. Right now, halfway, who is the player of the year in Oklahoma high school football?
Oh, man. I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite right now for us.
There's not, and it's weird because usually there's 3 or 4 candidates that you're looking at and just waiting to see what happens, but there's not an obvious answer to this, is there?
No, the candidates you would have had before the season, their teams have kind of fallen on hard times at times, or they've struggled themselves. It's really intriguing to see that matchup. But I know one player that stood out is Blake Summers down in Davis.
Absolutely.
And I know, Scott, you've seen him. So talk about him as a player and his candidacy in this.
You know, I have. I've seen him twice. I also saw him in the title game last year against Millwood when he was really the guy. You know, Braden Ruth was the big-time player on that team last year. But Blake Summers was the guy who orchestrated the final drive, or the last 2 drives really, that helped them finish off that comeback. Really impressive job of running the wishbone. But he has really progressed this year because they don't have Braden Ruth in that backfield anymore. They've got a lot of guys who are decent. They run about 7 different guys through that wishbone offense now. But Blake Summers is the playmaker there. He's bulked up. I think he's gotten faster. Been very impressive in the 2 games that I've seen. I saw him against Vian and Heritage Hall, so it's no slouches that I was watching him play against. And he was a big play machine. He was really impressive. Like I said, he's bulked up some. You know, he was a pretty skinny kid last year, and I think that's helped him, you know, run through some arm tackles and things. I think that he's definitely got to be in the mix on this list right now because he is such a game changer at quarterback, and that's such a vital position in that offense. Davis is sitting there at the top of 2A, looking like they're going to have another run at a title. So he would definitely be right up there. I think in this conversation right now. The thing that's interesting is that, you know, I talked to him and he's not really getting a lot of recruiting attention, and you know, I hope that it turns around for him because he's the kind of guy that I think deserves to be on a college football team somewhere. You know, obviously not running the wishbone probably, but as a defensive back, I mean, the kid's not afraid of contact. He'll come up and hit you. And but yeah, I would definitely throw him out on this list. Anybody else that is out there that needs to be discussed right here?
Well, I think it's interesting because with Summers, it's almost like, I don't want to say by default because he is a really good player, and his stats have suggested that again this year. But it's almost by default because he's the only one that is really a real standout player as a senior on a team that's at the top of their class. 'Cause, you know, like last week, I would have thrown Bryson Lee's name in there at Westmore, the quarterback. But then when you go up to Jinx and you know, even if they had been competitive, maybe you could still give him a case, but they get blown out. So that makes things different. You know, it's like a Heisman Trophy award in that.
Yeah.
You've still got to win some games. If there was anyone else that I might put in there, I mean, Nick Smith at Kingfisher, they've kind of reestablished themselves. The Hennessy loss was, you know, kind of, I don't want to say a fluke because Hennessy's good, but they've reestablished themselves in 3A as one of the better teams. But, you know, I mean, he's a junior and they've got a really great defense, so he's not necessarily, you know, 100% the key in the same way that I think Summers is. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe somebody, as we progress here, down the last 3 or 4 weeks, we'll step up and do something. But
one guy that I'm curious to see how it goes the rest of the season is Mason Fine at Locust Grove. That offense is scoring at a ridiculous pace. I think 5 games at this point that they've scored 60 or more, if I'm remembering right. So you know, they put up 70 again on somebody. I think they've done that 3 times now. And he's the guy that makes that offense go. So he's obviously going to have the statistics to do it. The question is, you know, when they get into some more difficult games, is he going to be able to maintain that pace and keep doing those things? But really impressive season that he's starting to put up. Trent, you got to see Tyler Adkins at Tulsa Union. He's a guy, Union is obviously the favorite in 6A at this point. He's I think the most crucial part of that offense. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, they kind of struggled with Southmore. Southmore actually took the lead at one point in the second quarter, 21-20. And I think that was the point where Union kind of said, you know what, we're going to keep our defense off the field, and we're going to line up in double tight and just run at you. And it was Adkins. That was the key to that. He went for 175 yards. He only had one touchdown, but he set up all but I think one or two of their scores, and they ended up winning 51-21. So it's kind of like when they said, you know what, we're just going to give Adkins the ball and roll here. They ended up rolling, and I mean, he makes their offense go. There's a lot of playmakers there, but he's got a good offensive line. But he's a talented running back, probably the best I've seen so far this year, and I've seen some, fairly good ones. But just being a junior, I think next year you'll see him receive a lot of recruiting attention.
And that's absolutely right. I saw him in the preseason and was floored by his ability, because I didn't really know anything about him at that point, and he was really impressive. I was at a scrimmage with Norman North that included Norman North and Edmond Santa Fe. So you had him, Quan Hogan, and Darren Williams of Santa Fe, all three junior running backs. And Jacob, you've seen Darren Williams more than any of us. Talk about him as a runner.
Well, he's a big physical back that's always going downhill, and he's really become the focal point of Santa Fe's offense. And as a result, I jotted down some numbers. He's averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground, and he's already got 1,200 yards in the season and 16 touchdowns. It's a different change for Santa Fe. They've had Justice Hansen in the past where they've thrown the ball a lot more and run the ball with him too, but now they've got this go-to running back who is bruising defenses. He's not – you can't arm tackle him. You have to go low to tackle him. You go high, he's going to run over you. He's this. I think he's the best power back I've seen in the state so far. With some teams, trying to run the power game, I think Ida Alexander could be thrown in that mix for a power running back. But in the junior class, for sure, he's definitely near the top of that class.
And the interesting thing about him, just from what little time I've seen him, but going especially off of his game against UConn last week, is that he's not necessarily built like a power back. He's a little bit lanky, not a real thick, guy with the big legs, and he's got great speed. But just I would love to know what his yards after contact were against UConn the other night, because he had, two long touchdown runs that were right up the middle. Both of them that he was hit once, if not twice, at the line of scrimmage, and broke free. For both of those runs, he ended up going up for over 200 yards against the Millers that night. Just a big play guy, and really fun to watch, because when he gets in the hole, he's going to make something happen. Quan Hogan is a guy that's it's been a little bit tough for him to get going this year. They're doing a lot of different things. He's as much of a receiver as he is a running back, really, at this point. They getting the ball out of the backfield, or just lining him up in the slot. Trent, talk about what you see from Quan.
Yeah, I still think a lot of him, but I think with Norman North, there's almost too much stress on Quan Hogan and then John Kolar, the quarterback headed to OSU. There's just not enough there. And I think from I saw him in week 2, and then I saw him again in week 5. And it's just like, I guess I saw them 3 times over that period. And it's just by the time week 5's there, they're just, kind of tanked. And they don't have a defense. They don't have anyone else around them. So I don't know that Hogan's numbers are going to be there, because they're asking him to do so much. But I still think he's a definite Division I talent. He can do a lot of things, like you said, extremely versatile player. But you saw him last week. What were your thoughts?
That was exactly my thought. Is that for him to be able to do anything, they've got to get him outside the tackles, because that offensive line was young last year, and I thought really coming on strong. And it seems like they struggled a little bit. Mustang's defensive front isn't a world beater, and they struggled to open some holes for Quan, and he was getting hit a lot in the backfield, getting bottled up really quickly. So they've got to do something there. He's really dangerous when he gets out there in space. So we'll see if they're able to open some things up for him. I do think that there's a lot on his shoulders and a lot on John Kolar's shoulders right now, trying to keep that offense alive. And like I said, they're on the field a lot because the defense has had some issues. But just this junior class of running backs in general is pretty incredible. Trent, you mentioned Nick Smith at Kingfisher earlier. You got Jeremy Lewis at Lone Grove, who is right there in the mix as far as a D1 prospect, a big 6'1", 6'2", 200-pound type guy who can really go. Last year we had the year of the quarterback with Justice Hansen and David Cornwell. But watching this group of running backs that are juniors right now is going to be pretty fun for the next rest of this year and next year, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Another one I throw in there too is I'm not sure he's gonna get Division I looks as much, but Terrell Love out at Heritage Hall is another power back. A little more of a traditional power back than Darren Williams, but he's having a really good season for Heritage Hall. They give him the ball a lot. He's scoring 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. It seems like doesn't have the yardage, but he's really getting in that end zone for him.
And Tevin McDaniel is a really fun guy to watch too. I mean, they do a lot of different things with him. They don't really run him so much as a traditional running back, but they throw to him a lot and do some different things. And he's a really fun, another big guy too, just like Love.
Yeah, they've got a great junior class out there at Heritage Hall, and that's what Santa Fe has too. Santa Fe's built on that junior class, so there's a lot of talent.
All right, now there's one thing that I blogged about when I posted our Class 6A Division I rankings, is whether or not Southmore deserves to be in the top 10. They're 1-5 right now. Ultimately, they did not make the top 10, but they got a really, really strong look because I think that the talent is there. Trent, you've seen them as much as anybody, and it seems like maybe things are coming together a little bit better now that they've settled on a quarterback.
Right, yeah, Casey Thompson, freshman. Get used to hearing his name because Kendall's younger brother, who was at OU and then transferred out to Utah, is actually starting now out at Utah. But he's a big time player. I mean, he went for 175 passing and over 100 rushing against Tulsa Union. I mean, you just don't see freshmen do that ever, and there's not a ton around him. They've got Dunye Rice, who's kind of a receiver, running back, who's a good player. Their offensive line's progressed. It's still not there. But, he's kind of, as he gets better, so does the offense. They're fairly decent on the defensive side of the ball. So, like you've said, they're definitely not the worst 6A1 team I've seen, but they're 1-6. And I said after they were 0-3, I said that they were the best 0-3 team out there, and they needed this fresh start. And, their one win is against Moore, but, they've already played Owasso, who they almost beat, lost 13-9. Tulsa Union, who they hung with for at least a half. So, and then you got Mustang. So they'll have played the top 3 teams in their district already. So even if they lose this week to Mustang, 1-7, they could still possibly make the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge game for them. It's even bigger for Mustang because Mustang can just about wrap up the number 3 spot in this district. But Southmore, if they can pull off a win here, they throw themselves right into the mix for playoff consideration. Edmond North and Norman North are the other 2 teams. Norman North, I still think is the better team out of that group. But Edmond North, I think, is maybe turning things around now that they're maybe gaining a little bit of confidence, Jacob?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're starting to figure out some offensive things they can do with their quarterback situation changing so drastically and quickly to start the year. And but I think they're still going to rely on their defense. They got Caleb Booz, David Wright on the edge. They got a nice front 4. They really or 3 actually. They really have a nice defense that can keep them in games. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if Quan Hogan and John Kolar, what they can do against that kind of defense after they struggled with Mustang last week when Edmond North's defense is a little more talented. And I think that's going to keep them in the race till the end.
It's just so interesting there because it's still really wide open in both districts between those 3rd and 4th spots.
Yeah.